Hello and welcome to ArcGIS Runtime Building Adaptive Maps. My name is Nathan Castle and I'm a product engineer on the ArcGIS Runtime SDK team with a focus on .NET technologies. In this demo theater, I'm going to introduce a new pattern for supporting themes in your maps. I'm going to start by discussing dark themes, light themes, and high contrast mode. Then I'm going to talk about why you might want to support these concepts in your maps, other patterns in ArcGIS, and then I'm going to describe the theme-aware map pattern. Then I'm going to go through some demos showing how to create, use, and share theme-aware maps and incorporate them into your applications. Finally, I'll conclude with some supporting resources, pre-made maps, templates, and other resources, as well as a feedback survey, which I'm going to ask you to fill out if you find this pattern useful or have interest in using it in your own applications. To start with, I'm going to talk about some background information, starting with dark mode and what that is. So dark mode is something familiar to a lot of software developers as part of IDEs, particularly because in my experience and in others' experiences, it is easier to read, especially for long durations, light text on a dark background than the reverse. Dark mode was introduced at the system level, going as far back as Windows Phone in the early 2010s. In 2015, Windows 10 was released with system-wide dark mode support. And more recently, we've gotten iOS, Android, macOS, and various Linux desktop environments also supporting it natively. So this is becoming a first-class cross-platform concept. It's also supported on the web through Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Safari, and Chrome on all of those mentioned systems. High contrast mode has been actually around a lot longer than dark mode, at least on Windows. It's thought of as an accessibility feature. Limited web support currently, although that is going to change in the near future. There's been a lot of talk about expanding that as part of web standards. But that's another thing you want to potentially support in your applications for users who need it for whatever reason. Now, why do you need to support these in your maps? Well, with high contrast mode, with dark mode, with light mode, the system is doing the work of rendering the UI in a significant way, so the system is able to reskin your applications automatically. That doesn't apply to maps because the maps are actually rendered by ArcGIS Runtime itself, and the system doesn't have any visibility into that rendering. Maps in many mapping applications that we've seen typically fill up most of the screen. And so if your map doesn't respond to the rest of the application being reskinned, your application ultimately doesn't support dark mode or high contrast mode very well. High contrast in particular is an accessibility feature. So if you've got users who need that to use the system and you're not responding to that, that's potentially a problem. The other thing I'll mention is that consumer mapping applications, especially ones built into the systems, tend to support these features very well. So Google Maps, at least in navigation mode, Apple Maps, they have built-in dark themes. And on Windows 10, there's both a dark theme and a light theme, as well as a high contrast mode that works out of the box. Moving on, I want to talk about some existing patterns. In particular, I'm going to mention the floor picking pattern that's used in our ArcGIS Indoors and other applications with an emphasis on indoor mapping. So this is a case where there's a pretty common feature need, which is the ability to select the floor of a building that you're mapping. Instead of implementing that as a special feature in ArcGIS, that's actually implemented on top of existing functionality. In particular, feature layers, definition expressions, and a predefined schema or pattern that defines how those features are used in relation to each other. So instead of having like a special floor picker API, you simply have a field, like a level ID, and the application is able to read that, and if it knows about the schema ahead of time, can show a floor picker, which ultimately just sets that definition expression behind the scenes. Next up, I want to talk about the details of the theme-aware map pattern, because that's pretty important and I think potentially powerful in terms of enabling you to use the web map pattern and also get light, dark, high contrast, and potentially other theme support in your maps. Before I move on, I want to just clarify and set some expectations. In particular, this is a proof of concept pattern. It's not an officially supported product. You're not going to see documentation in ArcGIS support. This is not officially sanctioned at this point. This is a prototype, and we want your feedback. If this is interesting to you, we can explore potentially moving forward with it. If it's not, if you have other ideas, we also want to hear that. I'm going to share some demo content as well. This is just demo content. It has not been certified for production use. It has not been validated. It may not be particularly cartographically correct or usable for its intended purpose. It's purely demo content at this point. And finally, there may be performance issues. There may be other complications. It should be fine, but it hasn't been evaluated for real-world production use at this point. All right, with that being said, jumping into the pattern, it's actually pretty basic. Using the group layer concept, which is well supported in Web Maps, ArcGIS Pro, and the new Map Viewer beta, as well as Runtime and the JavaScript APIs. And basically the concept is just have a group layer for each of your themes. The name should start with theme, just so the system is able to recognize that, that you're using a theme-aware map and not just a map with group layers. The sort of canonical theme names going in are light, dark, and high contrast, but you can also add more. You can have a red theme, for example, if you're doing an astronomy-based app and you want to support night viewing. By default, only one theme group is displayed at a time. You change the theme by changing the group layer that you've selected for display. And then in terms of the consumer, if you have an application that doesn't support themes to begin with, that's totally fine. It still works just like any other map, and hopefully users are able to look at those theme group layers and figure out how to use them. It's pretty intuitive in my experience. And then if you do have a theme-aware application, it goes a little bit further and it just hides the unselected themes. And then the map view control itself can dynamically adjust to system configuration changes, user preference changes, etc., maybe even the time of day, to choose the right theme and the right set of content to show at any given time. Now, talking about some pros and cons to this approach, the pros and the reasons why this approach was chosen for the initial prototype is that it's fundamentally compatible with all of the existing ArcGIS technology you're using today. You can implement this and ship it tomorrow. It's a prototype, so maybe don't do that, but you can at least try it out. It's easy to author content that's compatible with this pattern today using either ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Desktop, or even the Runtime SDKs themselves. There are some cons. The con is that you're showing potentially a lot of content. If you've got 3 themes, you've got your content there 3 times. That's kind of a lot. Depending on the application at least. If you've only got 1 or 2 layers, it's probably not a big deal. If you've got a lot more and you're switching between them a lot, that's a consideration. The other con is that if you have an application that's not theme aware, or if it's building on older ArcGIS technologies that don't have the group layer feature, everything should still work. You're just not going to get the easy ability to switch themes with a single click, and potentially it looks a little bit messier in your UI. All right, so next up I'm going to go through a demo of using theme-aware maps in an application, as well as changing the system theme. I'm going to show the sample application for WPF using a pre-made theme-aware map showing air pollution levels from the EPA. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And you'll note that my system is currently on the Windows 10 dark theme. So it comes through automatically. The default is automatic. I can manually override this in the app using the custom map view control settings, so I can select light, dark, or high contrast, and the selected theme content is shown. I'm going to go back to automatic and then show you how I can switch themes on Windows 10, and the map view control can respond to that automatically. So I'm going to go into my Windows 10 settings app, click on personalization, and then go to colors, and I'm going to switch to the light theme. You'll notice the entire interface changes to light, and actually the map view in WPF responded even faster than the Windows 10 UWP style apps. So that's light and dark mode, and I can go back and forth, and that works pretty seamlessly. Now I also want to show you high contrast mode. Now high contrast is considered an accessibility or ease of access setting, so I'm going to go to ease of access, select high contrast on the left, and then turn on high contrast. Now I'm on remote desktop, so it looks a little bit different. If you're using Windows 10 natively, it'll blank out the screen while the transition is happening. That didn't happen this time, but I can go back and notice how the rest of the app UI sort of updates. All the Windows Chrome updates, and the map content is showing this high contrast view. Now I will say just up front that this hasn't been fully evaluated for accessibility. I'm not an accessibility expert, and before going into production with this, you would want to probably do user testing, or at least consult with a cartographer to make sure that the colors you're using are acceptable and are going to be usable by your target audience. And I can turn high contrast mode off, and I'm once again on my system's dark theme, and that's reflected on my map control. And one more thing I want to highlight is it does usually make sense to give your users a choice over the theme they want, independent of system theme, either in your app settings. Right here I show it on the map view. That probably isn't necessary, but you should always respect user choice and enable your customers to choose what makes sense for them in the environment they're operating in. For the next demo, I'm going to show you how to create a theme-aware map in ArcGIS Pro. I'm going to start completely from scratch here. So I'm going to select my map template, just give it a name, go ahead and create that, and it'll open up to a map. The first thing I'm going to do is disable the existing base maps and then create some custom theme group layers. So I'm going to select new group layer. I'm going to give that a name and properties. And for the pattern, and in order for it to work with the map view controller created, it has to start with theme. So I'm going to say theme light. Add another one for dark theme. And I won't show high contrast in this case, but that's another option. And the theme system is flexible, so if you wanted to have like a red theme or a blue theme, I know IDEs have popularized things like solarized and a bunch of different variations on that. You can do that. It's not going to correspond necessarily to a system theme, but your app may have a special use case where you want to do that. So there are options. So I'm disabling the base map, and I'm going to go ahead and insert content from ArcGIS Online using the add data. This is going to pop up. I can go to living atlas for this content. You can also use custom content. And I want to highlight that the base maps we typically use are comprised of a base layer and a reference layer. The reference layer is things like labels that you want to show on top of your data, and the base layer is, of course, the maybe it's imagery, maybe it's the shapes that make up the street network and building footprints and all that. So I'm going to go ahead and search for both of those layers. Because we're not using the built-in base map layer functionality, we have to be careful about the ordering to make sure that the labels show up in the right place. So I'm going to go ahead and search for, let's do a light gray canvas. So I'm going to search for that, and you see we have all of these options. So let's select the light gray canvas base layer from OpenStreetMap. And you'll notice we have the canvas base and the canvas reference. So we'll add both of those. And we'll add this to the group, since that didn't come in originally. And of course, as I mentioned, the reference has to be on top of the base layer for it to show up. And I'm going to repeat that. Go ahead, add data. I'm going to search the living atlas for dark gray, and add both of these base and reference layers. And now you can see I can go ahead and toggle these themes on and off. When you publish your map, you should only have one of them enabled by default, and then a theme-aware application can go ahead and toggle the visibilities of the group layers automatically. Now I also want to show how you can modify the symbology, for example, for feature layers. So I'm going to go ahead and add a feature layer to our map. So I'm going to search the living atlas. I really liked the air pollution map because it typically has good data in it. So let's search for air pollution. And I'm going to restrict by feature layers because that is easy to symbolize. All right, so now we can see this color ramp. I'm going to move this into our layer so it shows up in the correct way. I'm also going to copy and paste it into our other group layer and put that into the correct position. And so now when we toggle the themes, we'll get it in both layers. I think it looks pretty good for a light background, but I want to change the appearance a little bit for the dark background. So I'm going to select symbology, and I'm going to get the options to change these symbols. And for now, let's just say we're going to darken these up a little bit. Let's just move all of these a little bit darker. All right, so now we've customized the appearance of the feature layer so it matches the theme a little bit better. And now I can go ahead and toggle this, and I get symbology that sort of matches the theme. And I think it looks pretty good, so we can go ahead and publish this as a map to ArcGIS Online for use in your application. I'm going to go to the Share tab, share a web map, and analyze it for issues before publishing. No issues found, so we're good to go. And click Share. All right, now the share job is complete. I'm going to go Click Manage the Web Map. This will open it in ArcGIS Online. Now I can open it in the new Map Viewer beta, and I should be able to see the theme-aware map in the groupings. By default, I get this great view with a specific theme, and I can also toggle these on and off per my preference. And finally, I want to show you some pre-built content as well as how to create content using the ArcGIS Online Web Map Viewer. This workflow completely avoids using ArcGIS Pro. I think ArcGIS Pro is pretty nice to use and pretty convenient, but you don't need to use it to create your theme-aware maps. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. I'm going to open the Vector Tile Style Editor and select a base map, ideally something that's relatively close to what I want. There are a bunch of different options. So let's assume I'm creating something, let's say a red theme. I can go click Dark Gray Canvas Base, select the style, and then I can make changes. And I have a bunch of different options for choosing the colors, and you can get very fine-grained with it. But let's just go ahead and do it this way. And then this is starting to look pretty good already, pretty dramatic change. Yeah, I think this looks good. I will point out I'm not a designer. I have 0 design skills, and that is going to be very evident with the space map I make. I recommend maybe choosing someone who has an eye for design when doing this, because they'll probably do a pretty good job compared to someone who doesn't. So I can zoom in. The style editor actually shows how the map looks at different scales, which is wonderful. And we can keep going from here, making changes. So far I'm liking how this looks. Maybe give nature a little bit of a dark green, so that shows up a little better. Zoom in to some places I recognize. And this is actually looking pretty fun. And I'm going to go ahead and save this now because I'm happy with it. So I can go Save As. Fantastic, that's now saved. We can go ahead and edit it at any time in the future. You can drill down and see some very specific categories of content. I'm happy with it how it is. Let's move on to making our map. So I'm going to go to ArcGIS Online. I've already signed in. I can select the Map Viewer Beta. Now this is important because the existing Map Viewer doesn't support group layers. Map Viewer Beta does. So I've got my untitled map. And the first thing I can do is add some layers. I just created this, so this is one of the first ones that shows up. Add my red themed map. This looks great already. Now the trick here is you actually have to create the groups by adding an existing layer to that group. So now I've got my group layer. I can rename this. Now just a reminder that you can use any number of themes, any names for themes, but the only ones that are going to be supported by a map control by default are going to be light, dark, and high contrast. But of course you can customize the code. You can add special support for a red theme. You can tie it in with the rest of the application settings in your app. It's very flexible, and ultimately you have control over how this works, and you can deviate if you want to. And if you do find a need to deviate, we would appreciate it if you fill out the survey and tell us about that so we can make the pattern work for you in the future. So we've got the red theme, and let's just add a basic light gray canvas. I'm going to search that, select Living Atlas, World Light Gray base. And now I can create the light theme. And now we've got a themable map, which I think looks pretty great. So we can go ahead and save. I won't go through the process. It's pretty straightforward, very similar to ArcGIS Pro. And now you're off to the races. No need for Pro, no need for desktop. And that wraps up the demos for today. Thank you for watching. You are appreciated. I do want to hear your feedback. I've got a survey link up there, and that will be included in any additional resources. I also want to share some links to other resources that you'll find useful. The Vector Tile Style Editor is excellent for creating base maps, customizing existing base map styles, whether that's for doing theme-aware maps or just customizing the base map to match your application's brand. I've shared some templates on ArcGIS Online. You can use this to get started in experimenting with the theme-aware map pattern in your applications, evaluating it for suitability. I've also shared a GitHub repo with the ArcGIS Pro project, as well as a demo implementation of a theme-aware map view control implemented for WPF, Xamarin iOS, and Xamarin Android, as well as a sample application for WPF. Thank you again, and have an excellent rest of your Dev Summit 2021.